Okay, welcome back then. Early August 1858, and this will be the summer quarterly report for this year, and it's been a good year so far. Really, really good economically. Our rail section is completed in Zonderlag and Ankara. Now, I should say, rail networks aren't always visible from space, so to speak. These areas do have railway. They are attached now, ultimately, to Constantinople, but they're not yet visible. Sometimes they become visible once you connect up another section. I don't know what the basis for that is or whether it's a bug, but in any case, not visible yet. But it does mean that this coal mining section now is firing on all cylinders. We can actually have a look at how close we are to kind of meeting demand for coal. So we've got, let's have a look. Structural production 18, expenses 23. That's pretty good. That's very, very close. So we're getting to the point. Bear in mind that these structures also are not set in stone. Various kinds of modifiers, for example, steel railways, also modifiers in terms of coal extraction. I don't know what we're researching at the moment, but all of these things will stack up. So we've got coke, for example. Coke increases. Let's have a look. Production of coal, is that 400% production? I don't know. We've already got coke, so I don't know what I'm looking at that. Precision machining is going to be like mechanical parts. Yeah, there's nothing I can see actually so far that's kind of, I'm sure we've got steel railways, steel rails implementation, so that'll be one thing that will dramatically increase. That will significantly increase coal mining production. Yeah, nothing yet, although we should bear in mind as well that come 1860 there'll be a slew of kind of research technologies that are kind of already researched. They exist elsewhere, and they will just kind of sort of osmosis fashion spread to us, and they won't actually have to be researched. So that may be a game-changing thing also. But we're very, very close, and we still have unexploited coal deposits, of course, in the Balkans, all of which we intend to exploit. And we might even end up for a period of time at least being a coal exporting power. The other thing I've been keeping an eye on actually is, because we've got to be looking anyway, I think the next thing is to extend. We've got construction then in Sinop for rail lines, Trabzon, with a view of obviously ultimately connecting up our main eastern base at Erzurum and then pushing that up towards the frontier city at Kars, the fortress at Kars. Now, at Kars, we currently have a kind of tea plantation, but there's also local access to iron, as there is in Van. In fact, there's fairly substantial access to iron in Van, as there is also in Diyarbakir. Now, that would kind of deal with another issue that we're looking at. Coal is one issue, the other is iron. We just don't produce enough iron. I mean, we're importing like 10 units of iron per turn just to break even. In fact, we make slightly more than breaking even. Now, we do have an iron mine in Sofia. That is a very very sort of low sort of productivity because we don't have any railroads connected to that. But once we've got that connected with railroads plus Van, plus basically the east, there's also access to iron in the Middle East outside, for example, Damascus. There's iron access in Lebanon or Beirut. So for sure, the main problem is that a lot of these things are spread out. But I think at the very least, the potential exists in fairly short order, within the next 2 years, to begin to kind of get the eastern frontier, connected to Constantinople via rail, and begin to exploit these iron extraction sites. Definitely on the cards. One thing we'd have to do with Diyarbakir, first of all, is actually integrate this area into the national economy, which is not the case, and we would do that by building a collection centre at Diyarbakir, which would deal with Diyarbakir and also the surrounding regions. So that's a kind of plan economically. We've taken the pressure really off of coal now, and I think we're at the point where we only need to import a very small amount. We're importing 3 units. Current stock's 27, 29, so 3 units gives us. Bear in mind we have a small amount of craftsman production as well. The other thing we have to keep in mind with coal is these railroads aren't just kind of, abstract type things. Every time we build a new stretch of railroad that kind of services various sites, whether they're factories or whatever else, they themselves consume more coal. The more railroads, the more locomotives we have, the more kind of coal we eat through. So we have to keep that in mind a little bit. The other thing we've begun doing is constructing an additional luxury goods factory in Sinop. One of the reasons being is we do produce a fairly significant amount of manufactured goods, to the point that it's driving the price of manufactured goods down enough that for the most part manufactured goods sites, like canned goods, they don't really produce that much. A lot of them run at a loss. They don't produce much of a profit. Now manufactured goods is profited on basis of export. So we do make a profit, on these things. I mean, the shipbuilding site is meant to run at a loss, but manufactured goods, I think the price of manufactured goods is domestically very, very low. The economy is just flooded with it. Excuse me, with manufactured goods. So we need to kind of depress the amount, or find a way of conversion, basically converting manufactured goods into luxury goods. Enables us to sell kind of the same thing at a higher price, really, in a fashion. And we do have one luxury goods shop manufacturing in Sinop that converts to manufactured goods, plus a host of other things like coal, timber, minerals, and some capital into 4 units of luxury goods. And Sinop would do much the same. So it does require other things to be added to the mix, sort of thing. But the economy is looking really, really good. I mean, exports remain sort of decent enough, always sort of teeter-tottering around 50, 60 at 150 revenue. Domestic market sales 106 for 347, and our imports are pretty much always set around 36 for 110. Imports are gradually, slowly declining as we're getting railroads opening up and we're getting these mining sites and various kind of centers for exploitation developed. We just, it requires us to import slightly less of the things that we are importing, principally because we're focusing our economic development on trying to reduce the amount of pressure on private finance, so that we have better turnover of return, and we can begin then looking at other areas for economic expansion. That's pretty much it, economically. In terms of military matters, Yemen is the kind of age-old story now. It's been running for 8 years. It's something that I look at now and think, God, how is this ever going to pay for itself? That said, the raw materials here are quite lucrative, so really it may not take that long, but it's just going to require, before we reinvest anything else, I think, into this area, it's just going to require this force to try and, at the very least, pacify the western part of the country. The key to Yemen, to tell you the truth, might be actually just finishing the job in Hejaz. We don't have any major issues here, and we are now beginning to, sort of develop the area with road improvement networks. We're doing this kind of gradually, but it just stacks up. We're trying to do one little thing every fortnight or every month or so, and it is beginning to kind of have an effect. I think looking at the average colonial penetration, it's reasonably high, for example, in Medina and also Mecca. But it's the surrounding regions, the kind of provincial parts of the Hejaz. Colonial penetration is low enough that it's going to take, I think, some time. I mean, to get this area to, for example, the colonial penetration we'd need 50 to 100 in the colonial capital, which we already have. We have 55, plus an average colonial penetration of 40 across the board to basically to move. And I mean, we don't have any provincial part that is 40. The closest we've got is Mecca, which is 37. So it's definitely a long-term project. We haven't done much with Hejaz. We've been a little bit careful about sort of stirring anything up, causing any kind of problems. There's some areas that militarily, for example, we don't really control the surrounding areas. Militarily, the Hejaz controls the area around, even though the Hejaz doesn't exist really as a polity in any kind of way. I guess tribesmen just control the area surrounding Medina, even though we have fairly substantial colonial penetration there. We also have an issue here with rebels. I don't know what's going on in Aqaba. We tried to kind of reoccupy this region, but it seems permanently, I don't know if there's a pirate base running from it or something like that, but we need to address that at some point. But that's it. We had a colonial revolt in Iraq. That's been put down. We also had some troubles, the Lebanese up to their old tricks again. We had kind of problems in Lebanon. This didn't luckily kind of sprawl into anything serious in terms of sort of the Western press getting all excitable and making kind of crazy ideas about Western forces intervening, French and so on. That's it. Economically sound, we're seeing really, really good growth. The other main thing with the economy also is we've seen a gradual decline in inflation. So we're seeing strong economic growth, but also inflation is now down to 0%. That's really, really good. That makes things very, very affordable. And it's a positive development. Exports for the most part, I've been in any kind of serious quantity for things that are valuable. I've been to like France, textiles, manufactured goods to Belgium, opium and dyes to Austria and Britain and things like that. And consistently we sell tobacco across the board to a range of different powers, and then of course just a lot of agricultural goods. France is a good customer for agricultural goods, and we have a trade agreement with France. There's a good chance that France would have possibly bought a lot of these commodities from from other powers, maybe China or someone like this, but they haven't. They're buying them from us, and that's great. So yeah, a good period, a good kind of quarter economically. Exports again remaining high, and that was a little bit of worry about a year ago. That's it. Now things have gotten really interesting on the foreign policy front. For our part, one thing that we've looked to try and do now is to try and cultivate sort of relationships that we might be able to turn into commercial agreement. One is with the Empire of China. The Empire of China is a chaotic sort of place, profoundly backward, and yeah, just very, very vulnerable and just economically undeveloped. But this could be a colossal market for manufactured goods and certain kinds of things like tobacco, all kinds of commodities. I'm thinking that, if we could get relations to a kind of high enough watermark with China, there are areas of development, even of industrial development, but it's Chinese porcelain. But yeah, these are exceptions to the rule. China, I don't think even has the capacity to build manufactories, and it has an ongoing civil war, which you can see is causing kind of disruption, looting, signs of looting, and chaos in the countryside. But this will end. This will stabilize, and if we can cultivate China as a trading partner, this could be a really, really lucrative prospect for us. Really lucrative. So China, we tried to organize a state visit to China. It didn't come off. They weren't interested, but we'll be persistent. We did the same thing also with Persia, thinking also that we could maybe get a commercial agreement with Persia, and even actually begin to just build RGOs in their territory. We could begin to look to exploit Persia economically. We don't necessarily want to militarily control Persia or anything like that, but we could economically move to dominate Persia. And there's some interesting commodities. We've got access to coal in Tabriz, for example, silk also. I think they already have the silk exploited. Dyes, which is something that, we have good domestic access to dyes, but dyes has been a consistent export market, and it's going to require a bit more attention at some point. And we've got huge amounts of opium, for example, in Shiraz. So it would be an interesting area for us to kind of try and exploit and develop, but it would require us to improve relations, which we're trying to do with, for example, a state visit, and they've refused that. China and Persia have refused that. But nevertheless, I think we'll be persistent. We'll be persistent here. One of the problems we're having with foreign relations is our economic expansion plan. It wasn't designed to be an a military expansion plan. It wasn't designed to be a big expansion plan, but really a kind of modernization plan, but kind of snowballed a little bit into an expansion plan when we considered what we could do with the additional army corps that we had at our disposal. We have now begun, or really almost completed, the construction of an entire new field army, which comprises of 90,000 men, split over 3 corps. One of them, of course, is a guard corps, 2 infantry corps, cavalry division. The cavalry division we also broke away from the Eastern Command, just because there was actually a command penalty running at about 3 or 4%. So we thought, it already has a cavalry division. We could subtract a cavalry division. I'm struggling to speak today, and add maybe another 2 independent artillery regiments to Abdul Karim's force. Abdul Karim's force is still a healthy size, 93,000. It's a good size, but he has command points, sort of additional command points at his disposal. So we might look at maybe sort of developing some artillery. That's pretty much it. That is the army reform plan. The deadline was 1860. We're ahead of schedule. We're in sort of August 1858. We now have 4 standing field commands, all of which, if a war started tomorrow, they could be called into action. They're all for the most part combat worthy. The 4th one might have nothing's locked. So even the kind of sort of service asset units, the engineers, the provosts, the field hospital, all complete. We actually managed to rummage around our territories and find a couple of supply wagon kind of trains that we could attach. One of them looks like it was a captured Austrian one, actually. That was in Sarajevo, and we just brought that to Ankara just to provide it with a bit of a kind of makeshift supply train. So the 4th Army is complete in Ankara under Abdi Pasha, and we'll keep that in place. Now, things have gotten really suddenly very interesting on the international front, and you can probably see if you can read the reports. So Well, first of all, Prussia has just declared war on France. This is ahistorical. It's not the scripted kind of Franco-Prussian war. We're only in early August 1858. It's not 1870. So Prussia has been heavily involved in the Low Countries, which is ahistorical, controlling most of this area militarily. I don't think they have any claims on Holland or Belgium, so I don't know what their aim is, but they've decided to spread that into France. That's going to be an interesting war, and we'll see what happens there. It's good that France is tied up. We're happy with this conflict. This keeps France occupied, keeps their attentions elsewhere. May even benefit us economically. France has a commercial arrangement with us, and they might, the war, for example, might necessitate building military units, which might necessitate things like manufactured goods, and we always have a lot of manufactured goods floated on the international market. So this could be economically fortunate for us, and also keeps a possible adversary occupied elsewhere, and that is welcome. Now, the other news, of course, as you can probably see from the report, is amazingly only 4 months after peace was declared, Piedmont Sardinia has gone back to war with Austria. Now, they would have had a peace deal which would have lasted, I think, probably for 6 months, which means that's been broken, which is not good news for Piedmont Sardinia. I think that would impact their relations with other powers. But this may be due to a kind of scripted event. I mean, we are nearing the period of the Risorgimento, and I can see in Friuli or Udine, this area is already controlled by France, by Italy, by Piedmont Sardinia, and I don't know why. Is this a revolt? Did this revolt happen and then Piedmont Sardinia declared war in support of it, and they militarily control the region around Verona, but they've only just declared war? That's curious to me, because typically speaking, you can declare war and then on the same turn make a move, but they've already made the moves and they've just declared war, which is not possible. If you make a move when you declare war, like on the same turn, if I declared war on Russia now and moved my forces in, that would be considered a sneak attack. That would be different than declaring war, leaving it a turn, and then basically conducting operations. If you kind of declare war and then move straight away, bear in mind that obviously it's turn-based, and they won't have even really received the news yet that you declared war. It means that the declaration of war that you're passing is just giving yourself carte blanche. That's considered a sneak attack. That is frowned upon. But I'm not sure whether Piedmont Sardinia... Well, they must have, yeah. They declared war against Austria last turn, not this turn, and we've just received the report now. But they must have moved simultaneous to that. So they've broken the peace treaty they have with Austria, and they've conducted a sneak attack. So that would have quite possibly substantial ramifications for them internationally. I don't know, but it may be in support of a rebellion. It's not clear. One thing that is clear is that Austria, despite the damage we've done to them, was making a bit of a show of fairly substantial forces near our border. Now, of course, they are still at war with Montenegro. I don't think they have claims on Montenegro. They militarily occupy the region. They're presumably holding their position here as long as possible to try and kind of lever tough concessions from Montenegro. Maybe military access, maybe reparations, I don't know. Maybe they do intend to claim the province. If they have claims on it, maybe they will occupy the province. That will obviously have ramifications for us in terms of what we do. Maybe we create some kind of fortified chain, just involved building fortresses in Kosovo and Albania, but food for thought. But we can see a fairly substantial force here under Joseph Guiole. Lots of mixed forces we can see. They have a fairly large army. It looks like, even God knows where they're getting the money from. They've got another army under Radetzky in Dalmatia. And then in Zagreb, again, we're seeing lots of mixed forces, garrison fortress units and stuff like that. So whatever state revenue they had left, they've ploughed into a significant army expansion program. The difficulty is, I'm not sure how sustainable this is for Austria. It may be that they've made they're going to do something. I started seeing this and thinking, are they going to do something crazy and wild? I mean, in a weird way, there would be a kind of logic to it. Because they can't maintain this force for a long period of time, I don't think. Maybe they had some state revenue accumulated, a bit of a war chest, God knows how, because they've just finished, a significant war with us, really, and Piedmont Sardinia. But maybe they had some savings. They decided to, convert that into military power for a quick, short, sharp sort of move. They can't maintain this force, I don't think. They're paying 100 reparations to us, and they have a significantly diminished economy, which means less transactions, which means less tax revenue. So long term, not sure how they can maintain this. I don't know, but it's interesting. In any case, it might have just been a show of force. I think there's such long odds that have declared war on us, but it might have just been a kind of just to show that they're very much still in the game, sort of thing. But whatever the weather, these forces presumably going to be heading north now and fighting Piedmont, Sardinia. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. We'll keep an eye on the situation for sure. But that's it really. Other than that, our kind of Project Sumatra continues. We're getting good colonial penetration. We've got trade posts established now. We're beginning to really challenge the Dutch position, especially the west part of the island. Trade post admissions for the most part, and we've now got at Padang we've got a trade post about to go in. The Dutch already have a mission there, but they haven't commercially exploited the region. That could give us access to tea and timber. So yeah, interesting. It also looks like Siak is actually, see, they've got a mission there. Siak is actually an independent kind of principality that's also on this island. Yeah, the Dutch have I wonder if we have access to colonial merchants yet. No, we don't have any spare colonial merchants. It's a shame. But this is another area that we'll look to for exploitation. I think the next thing we're going to do is to try and build a kind of marine brigade, a fairly large supply train. We're going to get that to maybe Kuwait or Basra, and we're going to conduct an expedition towards Aceh and try and establish ourselves here, build a harbour, build a kind of traditional fortress, get some military control, and begin to kind of pressure the kind of region. I think that's going to be the plan. That's it. Nothing else to report. The only other thing, I suppose, well, I should point out that I am continuing the process, which is actually finished this round, of expanding the naval base. So we've got a naval base is now level 8. We're going to continue that process. I won't do it right away because I'm going to sort of try and begin to accumulate a bit of sort of tax revenue again, mainly just to watch it to get an indication of how much we're making, because I know that there is now further pressures on the exchequer because we have a larger armed forces basically. In fact, it's twice the size that it was 10 years ago. So I'm just sort of trying to get a gauge of where we're at in terms of income. But once I've got a clearer idea, we'll dole out some money to expand the naval base again at Constantinople, and of course the fleet expansion continues also and is largely complete now. Actually, the third scouting squadron is virtually complete, and we're going to begin to organize that force very, very soon, as in the next month. Begin to organize that force into basically an additional raiding fleet, which we're going to send to the Indian Ocean. That's it for now. That's the late summer report for 1858. Next report then will be kind of autumn winter time, sort of October November time, and we'll catch up then. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.